So one of the great Christian writers and thinkers of the 20th century was C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, for many years, was an atheist, but when he came to faith, he brought his great intellect and the whole journey that he had taken to become a person of faith and brought it into his writing and his ministry. Many folks have read and been blessed by one of his classics called Mere Christianity, a series of shorter essays and lectures on the Christian faith, and it's just one of those great primers. I don't know, it's sold over 3 million copies, and many folks have been blessed by it. But at least for me, I think what was great about C.S. Lewis is he brought a great creativity to the Christian thinking and thought. Many folks would also be familiar with his classic, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, kind of a fantasy novel, and he wrote a number of others in the place of Narnia, a fantasy world, a little bit like Lord of the Rings. He was actually friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, but what made C.S. Lewis's Narnia series great is he explores all kinds of Christian images in the context of that creative fantasy world. Another of his classics, a little bit lesser known, but one that's really cool, is a short book he wrote called The Screwtape Letters. And what he does in the Screwtape Letters is he imagines a correspondence between a senior demon and a junior demon. And the senior demon is giving advice to the junior demon about how to draw us, humanity, human beings, away from faith. And it gives Lewis an opportunity to explore how we can sometimes lose and slip away from our faith. And at one point in the letter, he addresses the topic we've been talking about a little bit, that is distraction. So I want to read to you a little bit from the Screwtape Letters. He writes, as this condition, the condition he's talking about is losing your faith, losing faith. As this condition becomes more fully established, you will be gradually freed from the tiresome business of providing pleasures as temptations. As the uneasiness and his reluctance to face it cut him off more and more from all real happiness, and his habit renders the pleasures of vanity and excitement and flippancy at once less pleasant and harder to forego, for that is what habit fortunately does to a pleasure, you will find that anything or nothing is sufficient to attract his wandering attention. You no longer need a good book, which he really likes, to keep him from his prayers or work or his sleep. A column of advertisement in yesterday's paper will do. You can make him waste his time not only in conversation he enjoys with people whom he likes, but in conversations with those he cares nothing about on subjects that bore him. C.S. Lewis's day didn't include social media, but I wonder what he would say about that, subjects that we're not even interested in, we get all engaged in. He continues, you can make him do nothing at all for long periods. You will say that these are very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. These are demons writing, so the enemy is separating us from God. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into nothing. Murder is no better than cards if cards will do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. The exact opposite of what we've been talking about in this series on mindfulness, moving from mindfulness of all the things that go on in our lives to mindfulness, paying attention to the world around us. So the definition we've been using that comes from the book Holy Noticing, and again, if you haven't gotten a copy of that, I encourage you to get that and read along as we continue in this series. The author calls mindfulness holy noticing. It's having God help us to notice the world around us and also the world inside of us. What's going on inside of us? Holy noticing. And through this series, we've been exploring a mindfulness practice that's an acronym, BREATHE. And so we started out 2 weeks ago with being mindful of our bodies. Pretty easy to do. Our bodies are pretty concrete. And then last week, we talked about being mindful of our relationships, a huge blessing if we're mindful and we can grow and develop our relationships. Now this morning, we move on to the third step, and that's being mindful of our environment, the world around us. The author suggests that in a mindfulness practice, we can almost think like sonar, just kind of ping out into the world around us and pay attention. Now, depending on how your mindfulness practice is done, this might be a little bit difficult. I'll mention that in a bit. But I found that I'm kind of paying attention in a new way in the world around me as well. Not just in a mindfulness practice sometime in the morning, but paying attention to the world around us. And it's so easy to miss the world around us. The author gives two really interesting experiments that illustrate how easy it is not to pay attention. And one of those that he participated in, they're supposed to watch a video of people passing a basketball and count how many passes. And he did this successfully, but he totally missed a guy in a gorilla suit that walks through the video in the middle of it. And I read that and I thought, I wouldn't do that. And then I thought, no, I probably would do that too. Completely miss what is obvious. Or the author also shares another experiment that 50% of people don't even notice this little, almost like a candid camera scene. They have a person who asks for directions, and then they're interrupted by people walking through with an obstacle, and they switch the person. So it's a new person standing there, a different person, different clothing. Sometimes they even change the gender. And half of the people don't even notice they're talking to a new person. That's how easy it is sometimes to miss the very world around us, or sometimes to pay attention to the wrong things in our environment. I've been thinking about this since 2 weeks back. We had a guest speaker who came, Erin Leash, who teaches on mindfulness, and one of the things she shared continues to rattle around in my brain. She shared that they have noted that in an evolutionary way, our brains are wired to notice the negative. We're wired to notice dangers and challenges and fears. This goes back all the way to when we were living out in the woods and if there were animals or other dangers around us, you had to be kind of on your guard for all those dangers. And we probably notice even in an urban environment, we notice someone that looks a little off or make sure we don't get run over by a car. We're wired to notice the dangers and the fears, and not the joys, not the blessings, not all the great, good stuff that's happening all around us. Our brains have to be retrained, and we have to spend some special effort to be mindful of the joys which surround us as well. So I mentioned that if you practice your mindfulness in a peaceful place, it might be a little hard to think about the environment. I'll tell you, just for me, I rearranged my walk-in closet a little while back, and I put a chair in there so I can kind of go in, turn the light off, close the door, and it's a really quiet, peaceful place to pray and be mindful. But it doesn't do a whole lot for the environment because I can't see or hear anything well there. But what I've been doing is being mindful of environments that I've been in before. Like those scenes you saw earlier, I picture being at the beach and imagine the waves. I picture being in the mountains or other beautiful places, being out on a bike ride, and I kind of imagine the environment, the beautiful creation that God has given us. Or I wanted to share with you, earlier this week I had an interesting moment. The one morning I decided that I was going to be mindful here at church. I was going to go up into the balcony and try mindfulness here. As I got all my stuff and I went out to the car, you've probably done this too. You walk outside and you go, oh, I forgot to notice that it was all frosted over. Forgot to go out and start it. And I thought, I'll just be mindful in the car. So I started up, let it start warming up, and I just spent a couple of mindful moments. I generally eat a granola bar on my drive to church. That's my usual breakfast. But I stopped and I was very mindful of my granola bar. I noticed the packaging, very creative and well done. As I ate the granola bar, I enjoyed the taste more than usual. I thought about how somebody at the granola factory created the recipe. There were likely testers who kept eating them, and a little more of this, a little bit less of that. I thought about the farmers and the workers that collected all the ingredients that became a part of my granola bar. I thought about God's wonderful creation that made all of those ingredients grow in our world. I was mindful of a granola bar in a way that I am not normally, and that was a wonderful blessing. And I think this idea of being mindful of our environment can help us enjoy life so much more. Now, I was kind of surprised that the author didn't take the opportunity to be mindful of our environment and talk a little bit about care for our environment. To think about this wonderful creation that we have and being careful. I mean, I've grown up with, and I'm sure many of you have, those reminders to not pollute, to use well, to recycle. In one of my mindfulness moments, I thought about a malfunctioning spray paint can and thought, I gotta research and find out how to dispose of that properly. I was trying to think about our environment. We hear all the time news stories about global warming and some of the challenges on our environment in that way. It's an opportunity for us to say, how can I be a better caregiver to creation? I think Christianity for a long time looked at our world and thought, well, God gave the world to us and we can do whatever the heck we want to do with it. And now we're starting to realize, no. We're caretakers. We're stewards. We're to care well for this world, to pass it down to future generations. And Scripture often talks about the glory of creation and challenges us to be good caretakers. So I wanted to read one of those many passages that talks about creation. I wanted to read to you Psalm 8. That starts out, O Lord, our sovereign, that rules over everything. How majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, I hope that you've sometime in your life been mindful to walk outside and see a dizzying array of stars and the beauty in the universe spread out there and are mindful of that wonderful, amazing creation. He continues, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? That God is mindful of us, calls us to be mindful because mortals, you care for them. Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. Kind of calls us back to our mindfulness of our amazing bodies. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet. Kind of sounds like imagery of a king in that situation. And we all know that kings can be authoritarians and rule with an iron fist their subjects, or kings when they do what they are supposed to do, well care for their subjects and all those in their charge? Which kind of dominion will we have over our world where we treat it with respect and love or abuse it? He goes on to talk about all the animals, the sheep and the oxen, all the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the pathways of the seas, and then ends where he starts. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth, to be mindful of our environment. And then next week, we'll move on to the next thing to be mindful of, our affect, our emotions, the things going on inside of us. But we'll do that next week. Amen.